All right, so the last thing we're going to do, Marcus and Francis and Paige and Reed, still waiting for Francis, is we're going to solve a system of linear and quadratic equations, okay? And we have done this before with a system of linear equations where we had something like, for example, if we said y equals 2x plus 5.
It's an avenue.
And y equals, 3x plus 7. And we were supposed to solve that. Do you remember how we did that?
No.
Anybody? Don't just look and immediately say no. Look, think, try to remember. Kind of. We did this with a method called substitution. That's elimination, which we also did. Okay, but this one right here, if we have y equals 2x plus 5 and y equals 3x plus 7, what has to be true about 2x plus 5 and 3x plus 7? Hold on a second. They have to equal each other, right? Because they both equal the same thing, so they have to equal each other. So we said 2x plus 5 equals 3x plus 7. And then that's where we did the combining the like terms thing. We got all the x's on one side and all the y's on the other, right? So how would I get all my x's on one side? Okay, I would subtract 2x from both sides. I could subtract 3x from both sides, but it's nicer to subtract the smaller one from the bigger one. So 3x's take away 2x's is how many x's? 1x. And then that's plus 7. So now I've got all the x's on the right. How do I get all the numbers on the left?
Subtract 7.
Subtract 7 from both sides. And so 5 take away 7 is -2, so x equals -2. Does that ring a bell at all?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what do we do with the -2 to figure out what y equals?
Plug it in.
Plug it into either one of these things right here. So if I plug -2 into there,
-4
2 times -2 is -4,
plus 5.
and -4 plus 5 is
1.
So those would be my two solutions. Does that kind of ring a bell? Okay, it should. Because we spent a lot of time on it. Had a quiz on it, a test on it, homework on it, all that. Okay, what we're going to do right now is the same thing, except one of them is going to be a regular one, and the other one is going to be, yes, an x squared. Okay, so I'm going to take y equals -x plus 2, and y equals x squared minus x minus 2, and set those things equal to each other. Okay? Now before we do that, if I graphed these two things, what would I get? Right, I would get two linear functions. Okay? Where would those two things cross? At -2 and 1. Okay, so where they cross is the answer. Now, if I graph this, that's going to be a straight line. But if I graph this, what is this going to be? Right, it's going to be a parabola. How many times do those cross? Twice. Okay, or if something weird happened, and this parabola was up here, how many times would they cross then? 0. Or if something really weird happened, and they just touched each other right there, how many times would they cross then? Once. So when one of them is squared and one of them is a line, we could have two answers, we could have one answer, or we could have no answers. Let's find out, shall we? Okay, so what's the first thing that I do? What's the first thing that I do, same as we did in the other problem? Yeah, set them equal to each other. So -x plus 2 equals x squared minus x minus 2. Okay, yeah.
Well, your answer is exactly the same.
What do you mean?
Like 2, like
Oh, then that would be infinitely many solutions. Remember, we did that too. What's that? 4 equals 1x squared. And so Jolena is way out ahead of the pack. She added x to both sides, right? And she added 2 to both sides. And if you do that, -x plus x cancels. 2 plus 2 is 4. Then I still have the x squared. Negative x and x cancel, negative 2 and 2 cancel. So that's how she got 4 equals x squared. Now I have to square root both sides, and what do I get?
It's got to be 2.
2.
2 or
Negative 2.
negative 2. Because 2 times 2 is 4, and negative 2 times negative 2 is also 4. So how many solutions do I have?
2.
2 of them. Okay. How do I figure out what the y is? Which one would you like to plug it into? The first
easiest
one or
one.
second? The easiest one, which is the first one. So if I plug 2 into there, if x is 2,
Oh, Jesus.
then negative x is negative 2, because you have to do the opposite, and negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So one place that those two graphs cross is at 2, 0. And then if I plug in negative 2, negative 2 is positive 2 plus 2 makes 4. Okay, so this has actually 2 solutions, because again it's a parabola and a straight line. Okay?
Get the graph.
No, sir.
Yes.
No, I said no.
No, yay.
Oh, I thought you said yes. All right, let's do one more, because this is going to be a little bit different strategy to solve it than the last one that we did. Yes, you will have to use this strategy, or else you won't be able to solve it. Okay? All right, so the beginning is the same. I've got y equals x squared minus 6x plus 10. Y also equals 4 minus x. So since they both equal y, what can you do? Make them equal each other. So I'm going to say that means that x squared minus 6x plus 10 equals 4 minus x. Okay? Yes?
Doesn't matter if you flip flop.
Nope, doesn't matter if you flip flop it. Okay? All right, so what do you want to do to solve this?
I don't want to do it.
Well, I'm not asking you if you want to solve it. I'm asking you what do you want to do to solve it. Okay, so she's going to add x to both sides. So the x squared stays as an x squared. Negative 6x plus an x is what? Negative 5x. And I still have plus 10 equals 4. What do you need to do now? I'm actually going to minus 4. Okay? Because since it's a squared thingy, I need to get this all equal to 0 so that I can quadratic formula or could factor it. Okay? So usually when you have an x squared, instead of getting the x's on one side and the numbers on the other, get everything on one side equal to 0, and then you can either quadratic formula or factor it. The only reason that this worked over here is because I only had an x squared, I didn't have any x's. So then it worked out for me to get all my x's on one side and my numbers on the other. Okay? All right, so I got to factor this. Two numbers that multiply together to give me positive 6, add to give me negative 5. Okay, negative 3 and negative 2. Because negative 3 plus negative 2 is negative 5, and negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. So what are my two x answers that work? 3 and 2. Okay? So how do I figure out the y values that go with that? Plug it in. Do you want to plug it into this first one right here or the second one right here? Second one right there. So 4 take away 3 is 1. And 4 take away 2 is 2. So those are my two solutions. 3, 1, and 2, 2. Okay? So we're pretty much going to start out, take the things, set them equal to each other, and then get everything onto one side, and then either factor it or quadratic formula it if you like that better. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I'd have to cheat. Hold on. Dylan, you wanted to see one that has only one solution to see how that's going to look. Okay, so let's take this one. So what do we do to start? Make it equal to each other. So negative x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 2x plus 2,
That
right?
looks like a minus sign.
Minus x squared, whatever.
No.
Okay, so what do I do now to solve this? Add what? Minus 2x from both sides. Okay. Now what? Subtract 2 from both sides because I want it to be equal to 0. So that's going to give me negative x squared plus 2x. What's 1 minus 2? Minus 1 equals 0. Okay, now what's the problem there if I'm going to try and factor? Well, why not though? What's gross about this problem? What? Yeah, the negative in front of the x squared. So I'm going to multiply everything by negative 1. So I'm going to change the negative x squared to a positive x squared. I'm going to change the positive 2x to a negative 2x. And I'm going to change the negative 1 to a positive 1. Do I have to change the positive 0 to a negative 0?
That doesn't even make sense.
Doesn't even make sense. Okay, so now I'm ready to factor.
Can I go get another tissue?
Not yet. So I need two numbers that multiply together to be 1 and add together to be negative 2. Negative 1 and negative 1. And so what's my answer here? X equals 1 or x equals
Negative
1.
Oh.
It comes out to be the same because 1 minus 1 is 0 and 1 minus 1 is 0. So this one only has one answer. Okay? And then to find out the y value, what do I do with that? Plug it into the second one. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay? So does that make sense? So if you factor it and you get the same thing in both parentheses when you factor it, that means there's only going to be one solution. Okay? Excellent question, young Jedi.
Did you get any of those?
If you're lucky. Okay, now these say funny instructions, like solve by graphing, solve using elimination. Don't worry about that, just solve.